Welcome. This is a recording of a webinar that I did a few days ago. It is a webinar about QA and QA automation. You learn about what QA is, why it is so cool, why you want to consider it, and how to get there, how to become a QA automation engineer. And then the other half, I talk about a bootcamp that I've created that teaching people how to become a QA engineer or an automation engineer and what the benefits of the bootcamp is. And at the bottom, I'll put a link to the page of the bootcamp. I also have this video broken down into pieces, into chapters. So if you don't want to watch the whole thing and if you just want to jump into a specific topic, just click on those. You will see it at the bottom. And if you actually like the content and if you want to be there on the next webinar and actually learn in person and ask your questions, I also put a link to the page here. It's going to look like this if I don't change it by then. So you go to the bootcamp page, and at the bottom there is the schedule. I mean, not in the middle. There's a schedule of the next webinar. So go ahead and register for it, or just book a time with me and we can one-on-one. We can just talk and I can explain to you what the bootcamp is about, what QA is about, and if it's for you or not, right? We can just have a discussion. I'm the teacher, I'm the creator of this whole program, so you get to talk to me directly. All right, so enjoy the video. You can play it in 1.5 speed or something. I believe you should be able to understand me, or you can just watch it on a normal speed and take advantage of the breakdown that's at the bottom. All right, enjoy. All right, so I'm going to just introduce myself first. My name is Adam Askanfu. My title is Senior Software Engineer and Test, or Senior QA Automation Engineer. It's just the titles. We all are QA automation engineers. Some companies like to call it Software Engineering Test, or SDET, Software Development Engineering Test. Some companies would call it QA automation, simply. So when you're looking for a job, if you use those terms, you're going to find the same type of jobs. But use QA automation for the job search. I've noticed I get a lot more hits with QA automation because it's a more common term. My background, I'm a mechanical engineer. Long time ago, before I became a software engineer, I graduated from San Jose State University, both my bachelor's, my master's. And San Jose State is in the heart of Silicon Valley. It's in San Jose, like literally 15-20 minutes away from the headquarters of all the big companies, Apple, Facebook, Google. They're all in that area. I spent 20 plus years of my life in that area. And I graduated with mechanical engineering, worked while I went to grad school, finished, and then I quit my job, traveled a little bit, and went back in the job market. And it was not as fun as I thought it would be looking for a job at the time. Then I heard about software testing, and I took a short 3-month training on manual testing. So that program had very, very little exposure to automation, meaning they taught us a little bit of SQL, like about 8 hours of SQL, which is good enough. But no Python. It was just a little bit of introduction to JavaScript, what JavaScript was, and HTML and CSS, just one day, like really, really basic. But the program actually guaranteed an internship at the time. They don't anymore, but they did. So they got me into an internship. And at that internship, I just took off from there because I loved it. The whole point is I loved it. That's why I was able to take off. The internship was for manual testing, but the company was heavy in automation. And after my internship, when I asked to get a job, they basically told me I have to learn automation. And they extended my internship 2 more months so I could learn automation. And I did that. And ever since, I never looked back. My life has changed for the better. And it's an awesome, awesome field. That's why I'm actually teaching other people and helping them, achieve what I have achieved. All right. So welcome to this webinar. I should have said webinar instead of a course, but we're just going to talk a brief overview of what QA is, why it's so cool. So you guys already know why it is so cool. Okay. And I'm trying to motivate you, even though it sounds like you don't even need motivation. And then I'm just going to talk about the bootcamp while I'm going to teach you and such. A similar slide here. So what's QA? What's QE? Quality assurance, quality engineering. Nowadays, a lot of companies actually call it QE because before we used to be just focused on testing. So it kind of makes sense to call it quality assurance. But now we do everything the engineers do, the developers do, like literally everything. We just don't build the application itself. But once the application is built, from testing it to deploying it and maintaining it and monitoring it, all of that QAs are involved in that. So we are actually quality engineers and not just quality assurance, and definitely not testers, right? At this day and age, once you're an automation engineer, you have a more advanced skills than to just be called a software tester, because you do a lot more than testing. And that's really what I'm going to teach you in this course. It's not just testing, right? This is an automation course. So in the bootcamp, I mean, And we're going to focus more about the entire process of software engineering, right? We're going to focus the actual skills, the technical skills, but those technical skills have to be applied, right? Just because you know how to write Python code and Selenium code, Selenium with Python, that doesn't mean you're an engineer. Yeah, you're a coder, you know how to code, but that doesn't mean you know how everything plays together, right? So that's going to be the main focus of this course is, yeah, you can learn Python and Selenium just on YouTube, but you cannot learn how everything falls into place on YouTube, right? So that's why it's called quality engineering, and I want to emphasize on that. So we are responsible for quality of the product. So at the end of the day, the developers, the whole team is responsible, but the QA, the quality assurance, and the quality engineer is responsible for the quality of the product. We are the gatekeepers. At the end of the day, we are the ones that say the software is ready to be published to the public or not. If the QA, it doesn't matter how hard the developers work. If the QA says, "Hey, this is not ready, we're not going to push it out." Push it out meaning make it available in production to the public. If QA says no, it's a no, right? It's not like you're the boss or anything, but the manager, the boss is relying on you to tell him this is good to go or not. So you work with the team to figure that out. So you play a very, very important role because quality is super important, right? We are a critical component of SDLC, which stands for Software Development Lifecycle. SDLC is something you have to remember on interviews. If it's an entry-level interview, they might ask questions like that. SDLC just stands for Software Development Lifecycle. So when you're working on software and you're developing software, there is a whole life cycle that you have to go through, from planning it to releasing it and to maintaining it, right? And all of that is a process, and every company has their own rules and regulations they have to follow. And being part of an engineer is knowing all that. And every company does it differently. So once you have a general idea, you just learn it as you go. Okay. So just an example of testing a product, right? What does a quality software engineer do is test a product. And what does testing a product means? Technically, we've all been doing it all our lives. Whenever we're using software, we're technically testing it, right? If the software is not working, we would know it's not working. The difference is if that's your job, then now you have a process of reporting it, right? You have a process of, okay, it's not working. What do you do next? You have to create a bug or a bug report, right? Then you have to follow up and all of that. So that is the process. But just an example of what testing would be, if we take a look at Facebook.com, the web app, right? And we specifically look at the login page. So some of the tests we look at is kind of valid user login. That's a test, right? It's called a test case. Test case is very unique than one little action a user can take. That's called a test case, making sure that can happen. In this case, this is very, very, very vague, right? Kind of user login. There's a lot of things the user have to do to log. Kind of user type in the password. Kind of user type in a username. Kind of user click. The click button does it work? Is the font correct? The text correct? Is it even displayed, right? Kind of logged in user post a picture. Kind of logged in user post a video. Everything you do on a Facebook app or web app, it has to be tested. That doesn't mean one person is going to test all of that, but it has to be tested. For a company as big as Facebook, you're going to have multiple teams working on multiple components of that product, and you're going to have multiple QAs or quality engineers working on with the different teams. It all depends on how it is structured, but there's no way one or two QAs can handle testing of an entire application if it's as big as Facebook. So this is just an example. And we're going to look at, this is pretty good example just to understand what a QA does. So now I just want to talk about why QA is so interesting, QA or QE. Well, like I said, software is an integral part of our life, right? We can't do anything without software these days, like literally anything. Unless you want to completely disconnect and just live in the woods, you're going to use software. Whether you're cooking your food or you're communicating like this, we are using software, and it's not going nowhere, right? Software is not going nowhere. It's going to grow. It's only going to get more complicated, more sophisticated. So the demand for quality is going to grow. That alone, it makes it very interesting and very attractive field, right? We depend on it more and more. So when software is growing, the more software is being built and the more needs to be tested. So the more testers are going to be required, right? And it's going to be advanced. Even testing with AI and stuff, even testing is going to be more fancier than it is now. It's not just going there and clicking around. That's always going to be there, but you're going to start using a lot of fancy AI tools to make it a lot easier and a lot more efficient. So with this AI thing, some people discuss about replacing us or something. That's just crazy to me because a person have to program the AI. And you have to actually know how to test, so you can tell the AI how to test it. So it's not replacing us; it's making our lives a lot easier, right? And the more you know about AI, the more in demand you are. So once you're in the QA field, I'll get into that. The growth is unlimited, and AI is part of that. You just grow, right? And I do believe it is the easiest way to break into IT field, right? Literally, I watch videos, I talk to people, and everybody wants to break into IT field, and they just want to know what is an easy way. In my personal opinion, I think testing is the easier way to get into it. So some people are considering database administration, DBA right now. Cybersecurity is hot. I can't speak about it. I cannot speak about how hard or how easy it is because I don't do it. I've never done it. But I can speak for QA and automation, and I do believe it's the easiest way to break into IT. Going back to what I was saying earlier, right? I was an engineer, but I was a mechanical engineer. I was working in manufacturing in this big smelter building, making these big ductile iron pipes and designing equipment to handle all of that in a manufacturing environment. And I switched to a QA field just by learning testing, and I never looked back. So I think it is the easiest possible way to get into the software field. So if you're coming from a different field and you're trying to break into IT, I do personally believe this is one of the easiest ways, maybe even the easiest way, right? Okay, another reason why it's so interesting, because bugs can save lives, right? A bug is basically a problem. In software engineering world, when you talk about a bug, it means an issue. When something is broken, that means there is a bug, right? And so bugs can cause a lot of issues, right? We know about that what is it, Apollo 12 or something, that spaceship, space rocket that blew up. That was a software thing. Imagine like how many people died with that, right? It was like some unit conversion thing that was there, and they failed to test it properly. Imagine having a bug in a hospital software, right? When somebody's sick and the machine is taking care of them, and there's a bug in there. Imagine having a bug in a weapon, right? So bugs are super important. So our job is that much important. That makes our job so valuable to society, right? That by itself is very interesting. That's a good reason why QA is interesting, right? So I have examples here about that. And companies invest a lot on quality because it's much cheaper to find bugs while you're working on the product than to find it after the product is released. It's just so much cheaper, right? That's why the demand for QA is just really high and continuously growing. Like I said, it is the easiest way to get into the field. Okay, that by itself should be a good reason to be interested. Another reason is it opens a lot of doors. Okay, I'm going to focus on that throughout this presentation as well. It just opens a lot of doors. Just in case you don't like a QA, let's say you became a QA and you don't like the schedule or the type of work we do, or you just don't like programming at all. There might be reasons I cannot imagine why, other than to just want something different or something better that resonates with your personality. QA is just a lot of fun. So, but if in case you want to just expand or change careers once you're in IT, QA is a great way to get in, because as a QA, you get to interact with a lot of people, right? So in this presentation, it shows you what kind of people, at least at a minimum, that I personally interact with on a daily basis, right? So the QA is right here in the middle. The most obvious one is developers and other QAs, right? When you're obviously working with developers. It all depends on how it's set up. Sometimes you have a QA team, like a bunch of QAs in one team, and you guys support a bunch of other teams. Or sometimes the way I'm set up right now at work is there's a development team, and there are a couple of QAs along with a bunch of development engineers, right? So you interact with them. That's the obvious one right there. Then engineering manager, you work with engineering managers. So as a QA, you can grow into an engineering manager. You can be the boss of other developers, right? I personally have a partner that used to work with me. Now he's an engineering manager. He's in a different team, but he's a QA just like me. In automation, he went to senior, he went to staff. Now he's a manager. So under him, he is actually managing developers and projects and stuff. So of course, you can imagine how much he gets paid, right? Product manager. So when we're testing product, we're always interacting with the product manager. The product manager is basically that knows the product, that comes up with the requirements for the product, what the product should do, how it should act. So when you're testing it, you have to know what the product should do so you can test it does what it's supposed to do, right? So you interact with product managers a lot, and those people are not highly technical. They know a little bit about technical stuff, and they always want to learn about technical stuff because they want to communicate with us in a better way, right? They want to be effective. So they want to understand how we do and what we do, so they can talk to us in an easier way. So they're technically not a technical person, they don't know how to program and stuff typically, but they have that kind of mentality. And if you like to manage projects and products, project managers are different. These are product managers I just have here, but there are project managers also. Completely different thing. But you're going to make friends with them, and you're going to see what they do. So you're actually going to learn about what they do. That's more important, right? Knowing like what their life looks like. Then you have friends, so it's easy for you to break into that. It's always about friends, right? It's always about connections. Designers. So when you have a UI, right? Let's say you like Facebook.com or supersqa.com, right? The way it looks, engineers created that, but a designer designed it first. There's a science behind it. The way they choose the colors, they use the way they choose where the buttons go, what the font should look like, how fast it should flash, whatever it does, there's a science behind it, right? And the designers actually design it. They use Photoshop, Figma. There are specialized applications for them to design things. And then the programmers actually make it look like that using the program, right? So if you're in that kind of personality, if you like design, now you have access to those people. You know exactly what they do, and you have friends. All you have to do is pick up the skills, and now you have connections. I personally know partners that I hired. I use her as an example all the time. I hired her as an intern for QA, and she was doing manual testing, and she was learning automation at the same time. I was helping them learn Python. We are heavy in Python and Selenium, and Python for the backend. And she's a very artistic person, and she liked design. She didn't even know she liked design before that, but then she made friends with the designers, and now she's a full-time designer. Actually, it's been a year. She only did QA for 1 year. Hers was pretty fast. She moved right away, and so it opened doors for her. She couldn't be any happier, right? She's doing exactly what she likes, but she got in through the door as a QA. Now she can work for any company as a designer. Okay, DevOps are the same thing. They're engineers, but they deal with infrastructure, the cloud. We build the application. They make sure the application runs. Okay, so the point is, you work with so many different people from so many different backgrounds. It just opens a lot of doors. Okay, other things that makes it interesting is now you have a skill. Like, nobody can take away your skills, right? You are a programmer, right? So you can have side projects that you can actually make money with or have fun with. You can help your family members with their whatever their kids are learning. You can help them with programming. You can encourage them to get into programs. You just have a skill set that nobody can take away from, right? And unlimited potential. You can get in as a QA, like I said. You can stick with the technical part and become like a super popular, I don't know what to call it these days. Apparently, the word nerd is negative, but I wish I was a nerd. That just means I'm super smart, But yeah, you can be a super smart, knowledgeable person and just keep growing on the technical side, or you can get into the management side and keep growing that way. It's just really unlimited on how you grow in the tech field. And the work is very chill. It's compared to developers, you are less stressed out because they build something and you test it, right? So building it, even though you're involved, you're helping with the planning, requirements, and all of that. There's a lot less pressure on you than there is on development. That's really the only reason I didn't move to development, even though the opportunity is there and I will make slightly more money. Possibly not at this point. Once you're a senior, really, you make the same as developers. But as a junior, developers make more money than QA. And the only reason I don't consider it is it's just there's a lot more pressure, right? But it's just open for you. So it's chill environment. You work remotely. I'm fully remote right now. My company is in Santa Clara in Silicon Valley, but I just moved to Las Vegas right now during the pandemic, and I have a full-time job. It's an awesome. I go to the office here and there when I want to because I have family there. I visit there. When I visit family, I also visit the office. And another good reason is it's in high demand. You just go look at job searches. You will see it is really in high demand. That's a good reason to consider QA. Now, even though we already covered a little bit of this, the role of a QA in a company, testing plus more, that summarizes it. Like, you test, but you do a lot more. You're responsible for the entire life cycle of the application, deployment and maintaining it and monitoring it. Like, I'm on call all the time. Like, there's rotations where you are on call, and there are monitors that are running all the time. If there's any kind of issue with the application, you get notified. He's the first person to go investigate what the issue is, and then you take appropriate actions. If you can fix it, or you can ask for help. Test the application, write test cases, document test cases. We have a QA person here. He knows this very well, right? As a manual tester or any QA, you write test cases. The product manager, engineers will tell you, okay, this is what the product does, and you formally document test cases. What are the tests? Like, does login work? Does pictures work? Does videos work? You have to document it. There are tools for that, right? At a startup company or something, you might use spreadsheets, Excel, Google Sheets, or anything. But then there are tools like TestRail or TestLink, the more advanced tools. But all that is documentation, and you do that in a lot of way. And you're always thinking of a way to break the product. That, in my opinion, that makes it fun, right? You're trying to break the product, because if it's breakable, somebody will break it in the real world, right? Once you push it out to production, somebody will find a way to break it, right? So as a QA, your job is to break it. So that's the relationship you have with the developers, right? It's not a negative thing, but they build something and you're trying to break it, right? So if you enjoy that type of thing, this will be a lot of fun for you, right? So that's part of the role, is trying to break it is your role, because if you actually break it, then they have to fix it in a way that's not breakable, right? Managing releases is a huge part of your role, right? In most companies, releases is basically when something is built, tested, you release it to production. Production means the public, right? You have your own environment where the public cannot access it. There's a lot of names for it: dev environment, right? Development environment, test environment, staging environment, playground. All of those are words for, you have the copy of your website, right? You have facebook.com that we all access, but there's another copy of facebook.com that we do not access, but before the code is available for us to see, it's available on that environment. So people that work there can see it and test it and everything. So the process of taking the code from that playground environment to the actual production environment is called release. And QAs are a huge part of that, most cases. Sometimes there are teams that just dedicated to that, release engineers, but a lot of times, especially now with CI/CD, continuous development, continuous integration, with Docker, all the newest technologies are making releases easier. So QAs are becoming a lot more involved in that process. And it is fancy. When you think about it, you are responsible to push something to the public that millions of people use and see. That somehow must feel good. It does. Like the product I worked on helps students. It makes big difference in students' lives. So I'm actually building something for the company, right? And I push it out, and there are millions of students using it and I make sure they don't have any problem using it. And that actually makes me feel really good. That's another reason, and that's part of the role. Project management, dealing with a bunch of other people. So imagine Facebook again. How many people work on that, right? How many people work on one component of the product? That means you're going to have to interact with those many people, right? So you have to make friends. You have to know how to talk to people. You have to know how to communicate. This statement is for that. Imagine what it takes to coordinate, right? So that's part of your job is coordination. And if you're good at that, you're going to end up going through the management route, right? I'm not good at that, so I'm sticking with the technical route, right? So QA is responsible to track and manage changes and follow strict processes to do so. Communicate with third parties. You work with people outside of your company, vendors, partners. You have to coordinate with them. You have to work with people in a different time zones. Like I work a lot with people in India. I work a lot with people in Israel. Sometimes with people in Germany. So you are a very important person. But because of that, your time is also flexible. Right? When I work with my team members in India, I have to talk to them at night. Right? So I'm available working at night at 10 p.m. for my time. That means in the morning, if I don't go to work until like 12 o'clock, my boss is not going to complain because I'm responsible. I decided to work at night. So you have that flexibility. You're like your own person, right? It's almost like it's your own company. As long as the job is done, nobody's going to tell you what time to work to do your job. All they do is usually there's a 2 weeks period. You get assigned work every 2 weeks. And for QAs, usually we actually decide what we're going to work on. But as long as that job is done, nobody cares what time you come in, what time you leave, what time you're online. Nobody cares, right? So that is just beautiful, especially if you have family. Like taking care of your kids and having a professional job just is so easy. I don't have kids right now, but almost all my partners and my team do, and it makes their life a lot easier having that flexibility, right? I'm mixing like why QA is cool and what the roles are here, but it kind of works together, right? All right, and participate in hackathons, just like with the engineers, you work with engineers and you compete. All right, so let's talk about types of testing. So technically, there are 2 types. There is manual testing and automation testing, but I decided to break it into 3, load testing or stress testing. So manual testing, automation testing, and load or stress testing. Some points to consider. You can learn those things in parallel. Like you can learn manual testing and automation testing. I've noticed a lot of people would say, or training boot camps, or some other courses would say, oh, you have to know manual testing to do automation. I don't believe that way, and that's why I don't require it to join this boot camp that you have to have manual experience. Because manual testing is a lot of it is terminology and just actually testing practice, right? You just have to practice, and with practice, you become good at it. It's more of an art form, right? Manual testing is more of all testing is an art form. You just have to think about how can somebody break this? How can somebody use it in an intended way, or even in the intended way, right? So you can learn in parallel. You don't have to wait to learn manual to be able to learn automation. You can be learning coding and at the same time learning how to test, like writing test cases and stuff. Don't get intimidated. You take it one bite at a time. You take small bites and it's totally manageable. Okay. Learning never ends. Like I have a million things to learn. I know a million things already, and I have a million things to learn. So learning never ends. You got to keep that in mind. It's not something like you're going to take a training for 3 months and you're good to go, or you get a job and you're good to go. Even when you get a job, technology evolves. When I first became automation engineer, Selenium was our main thing. Like that's the only thing we have to care about. But now there are other JavaScript libraries that we actually have to care about. There are other AI testing tools that we actually have to care about. It's not that it's required, but it makes your life easier, your job easier and more effective. So you're always learning, right? For some people, that is exciting, actually. So your background has no impact, right? It has little, and I wouldn't say no impact, it has little impact. If you have a technical background, it would help you. If you don't have a technical background, it's not going to hurt you, right? That's the way I look at it. It's a benefit to have a technical background, but if you don't, it's not going to hold you back. What's going to hold you back is your attitude, right? Your desire and your dedication. It's really all about that. If you are excited about it, if you're willing to put in the work, no matter where you're coming from, if you never actually looked at a computer before, you can do it. But it's going to take you longer than somebody who's been using computers forever, right? So everybody goes through a different path, a different speed of learning. That is my personal opinion. I really believe it. Everybody can learn anything. It's just how fast you learn it is going to be different. So your background plays in that role. Me having an engineering background, right? Mechanical engineering is actually one of the toughest engineerings out there, right? So the fact that I went to school for so long and I've done all the mechanical engineering, my brain is trained to learn how to learn. Engineering school, they just teach you how to learn, right? The stuff I learned in school, I don't really use in the real world, but I know how to learn, right? So for me, having that engineering background made it easier to learn automation and to learn coding. I just picked it up a lot faster. So it helps you in that way, right? And the last statement is Google is your friend. I don't know if you've seen these memes, but there's a lot of memes that I agree with that says like 80% of a programmer's job is Googling, 10% is drinking coffee, and the other 10% is actually writing code. Totally true, right? I spend a lot of the time Googling. It doesn't matter how, if you were 10 years experienced or this is your first month programming, you are going to Google stuff. That is for sure. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about manual testing. So as a manual tester, you are using the product as the customer. You're manually using it, right? Let's say we're testing supersqa.com or facebook.com or whatever. As a manual tester, you're actually going there just like a user would do, and you're manually typing, clicking, dragging, downloading, doing everything you do manually. All right, that's number one part of your job. Then you create test cases, like I mentioned before. You document test cases in a proper way. Then you execute those test cases. Everything I just talked about, you do manually. You're executing those manually. You write those things in a formal way, then you do it. Then you actually execute it, right? You work with different teams. You manage releases. You file bugs. So when you're testing, you find an issue. There's a procedure that you have to file. It's a Bugzilla. If you want to look at it, is very popular tool. It's a free tool. I don't use it professionally. I just used it while I was taking the training. Jira, Jira, Jira is extremely popular in the industry. That's what I use, and that's pretty much all the companies use. And in the bootcamp, we actually use Jira to manage the whole training, right? All your assignments, or week to week, what we're doing, everything, we manage it as a Jira. In the bootcamp, the team is like a work team. The way we do it, the way we commit our code, the way we merge our code, the way we manage our releases, we actually have a release process, a pipeline. I'm trying to make it as realistic as possible. So I'm trying to use tools that you would use in the real world. So when you go to your first job, none of that is going to be new to you. The only thing new is going to be what they do, what product. Are they building a water bottle? Then building a water bottle is going to be new to you, but building it and deploying it is not going to be new to you, because in the bootcamp, we're actually going to go through the process of doing it. So in terms of finding bugs, Jira is the most popular tool, and I'm actually going to use it in the bootcamp. There is a free version and there's a paid version, and depending on how many people are in the bootcamp, I'm going to get a subscription so I can have everybody in it. So you're going to get a very realistic experience, and I think that's a huge plus for this for my bootcamp. All right. Another thing is good common sense as a manual tester or as an automation tester. Just good common sense, right? When you're testing something, you have to have common sense. Like I said, it's an art, right? It's a form of art. So you have to have good common sense to test something, right? And experience is the only way to get good at it, right? Like nobody's born as being a good tester, but as a test, your mind become good at looking at things and figuring out what can go wrong, right? Some people are natural about that. I personally know somebody that you tell him something and the first response is how it can go wrong, right? His brain is just wired that way, right? That can be a plus as a QA. Training, teach terminology. Most of manual testing trainings focus on terminology. Manual testing is mainly terminology, regression testing, smoke testing, integration testing, unit testing, black box testing, things like that, right? Personally, I get bored easily. Like as an automation engineer, you have to do manual testing, right? So like when we build new products, or like let's say a new page, you first have to manually test everything. Then you're going to code. The tests. So whatever you did manually, you're going to write code that will do everything you just did. But sometimes we don't have time, and I have to manually test something over and over again, because coding takes time. Once you write it, you can run it a million times, but until you write it, it takes time. So I personally get really bored and really annoyed. So I try to automate things a lot quicker, but that's just personal thing, right? Some people just might enjoy doing it manually, even though it's over and over. These are terminologies that as a manual tester, you'd have to know, or as a tester, you would have to know, but as a manual tester, you definitely need to know those: regression test, smoke test, black box test, white box, gray box, test cases, use cases, all of that. And on the job, those mean nothing, really, right? In reality, on the job, the terminology doesn't mean anything. Like you're going to pick them up. You're just going to know, because it's not that much. This is almost a comprehensive list. And you're going to use those words to communicate every day, right? But they become important on interviews, right? Depending on what kind of interview you do, they will ask you to explain what those mean, right? And we're going to talk about them in the bootcamp and in the interview prep. I'm going to help you prep for interview. So I'm just going to go over a few of them. Black box testing, which is the most common way of testing. Most QAs are black box testers. And that just means you don't have access to the code, right? You're testing it. If you go to supersqa.com and test the website, you're not going there seeing how the code works, right? That site is actually PHP, it's WordPress, so it's mostly PHP and JavaScript. You don't have access to the code. You don't need to know how to code. You're just testing it as the user would test it. So that's called a black box. You can think of, right? It's a black box. You don't know what's inside, right? And most manual testing is a black box. And it's the easiest way to get started. But my focus is to basically hotwire all that and just jump you straight to automation. Because if you have automation skills, you can still apply for manual jobs, right? But if you only know manual jobs, you cannot apply for automation skills. So now, all of a sudden, the job market just doubled for you, right? I mean, there are more jobs for manual testers, but if I'm hiring a manual position, if I have a manual positions open, and two people apply for it, one of them is manual tester, the other one is a manual tester, but also knows how to code, who do you think I'm going to give the job to, right? Obviously, I'm going to give that one. So it's just, they both know how to do manual things very well, but since one of them knows how to code, he automatically it gets favored, okay? So white box testing, another terminology, it just means you know a little bit of code, right? You can actually go in the code and pinpoint where the problem is. When you're testing it, you find a problem. Instead of saying, hey, there is a problem, you can actually say, there's a problem here, 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 because of this. Sometimes you might even fix it, right? So you actually know how to code, you know code, so you can go deeper into it, and you can explore. Or you don't know what the requirements are. A lot of times when you're doing backend testing, API testing, you don't know what the API is supposed to look like, what the payload is supposed to look like. You're supposed to get that information, but sometimes you don't. So if you know how to code, if you know the code, you can actually go in the code and figure out what the requirements are. It would help you write your tests. Again, and now you get paid more. Like black box versus white box. White box will get paid more because more skills, right? This is a skills game. QA is highly a skills game. So the more skills you have, the more you get paid. Gray box, I don't want to talk much about it. It's just something in between, a little bit of code and a little bit of testing. It's not very common. I just wanted to bring it up here because it might show up in interviews instead. But it just means it's right in between a black box and a white box. It's not very common, especially lately. So start learning manual testing ASAP to get experience, right? I would advise you, whether you join my bootcamp or not, whether you decide to do QA or you're still exploring the field, just learning what the field is about, I advise you to train your mind, manual testing, right? Whatever it is in front of you. I have this mic in front of me, right? So I can sit here and I can just figure out test cases for the mic. The obvious one is, does it work, right? Like when I speak, does it capture it? But you can test the volume setting, the orientation setting. There's a bunch of different settings, right? You have a water bottle. You can practice testing the water bottle. Like, does the cap work? Does it leak? If I drop it, does it break? Right? Anything in your house, you can practice. When I went to the training, my mock interview at the end was it was actually a group interview, and there was a paper shredder, and that was it. That was our interview. Like, hey, give me a test case for the paper shredder. So we just look at the paper shredder and we come up test cases like, what happens if you put one paper? What happens if you put a stack of papers? What if it's wet, right? So my advice is start thinking, like, look around you, whatever you see, whatever app you use, whatever website you use, think about, how would I test it, right? How can I break this? What can go wrong? Things like that. These are two resources. I haven't used them in recent days, but I know Guru99 has good tutorial on manual testing, and utest.com has a lot of resources on manual testing. They even have gigs. You can actually get a job there, like a contracting kind of thing that they give you projects. I don't know if they're still doing that, but it's worth checking out. So I do advise you to do that. But for anything automation, of course, supersqa.com, that's what I do, that's what I love, and that's what I teach. Now, to the fun parts, right? Automation, that's what I do, that's my middle name. So what is automation testing, or software engineering test, or quality assurance, or quality engineer? All of those are really automation. Create test cases, write code to execute test cases, and everything else a manual does. So everything I've explained so far, automation engineer does that too. Like everything the manual testers do, automation does. The difference is we don't manually test all the time, right? Manual testers, all they do is manually test stuff, right? Sometimes repetitive. Like software got to be tested like a bunch of times. I'll explain that later, but why that is important. But you tested this login page today, tomorrow you have to test it again, right? Because you change something downstream that might have affected this. So manual testers would test that all the time manually, and automation testers would write code that would test that. And then once the code is written, it just goes over and over again. So everything I just talked about applies for automation. The difference is automation testers actually write code. Why automation? It is fast. Like I said, writing it takes time because you're coding, right? So if you go to the login page and make sure the login works, you type in your username, type in your password, click submit button, right? That would take you what? 30 seconds, 20 seconds, right? It is it is quite fast, but slow, and it depends how you look at it. To write that in automation in Python, for example, that particular part might take you like, let's say 30 minutes, right? Find the locators, blah, blah, write the code. But then to run it, it's going to run in 2 seconds. So that means, and you can run it 10 times, 100 times a day. But if you want to do it manually, if you want to do it 100 times manually, 100 times you have to go type, 100 times you have to click, 100 times you have to do that. But with automation, you wrote it once, so it takes time to write. But then once it runs fast, and you just schedule it. There's a lot of tools we're going to use to schedule it. So we'll run all the time. You can schedule it so we'll run time basis. You can say run every hour, or run every 5 hours, or run at 10 o'clock every day. Or you can have it event based. Like whenever there is a new code, you can run it. Whenever there is a new change, that change will trigger the automation to run. And so it is fast, right? You can run hundreds of tests in 30 minutes, which will take you days to do manually, right? If you want to execute 100 tests manually, it might take you like a long time, depending on what kind of tests they are. But with automation, in 30 minutes, you can run thousands of tests. Okay, so, and it's repeatable. Once you write the code, you can run it over and over again. And this accuracy, right? Once you wrote the test, it's not going to change unless you go change it or someone goes change it. It's always the same. But when you're doing it manually, your behavior changes. Today you didn't drink coffee, or you had a long night last night. You partied a little too much, and you're trying to test today. You're not going to test the same way you tested yesterday. Right? Your behavior is going to change, so your accuracy is going to change. But with automation, it doesn't. It's highly accurate. The problem is if you have error in your code, you always have that error, right, until you catch it. But once you write good, safe code, then it's always there. Another thing is, you as an automation engineer, you deal with a lot of tools. You're going to know a lot of tools, right? In the bootcamp, everything you see here, we're going to cover. A lot of you, if you're not in the industry, you're not going to know what these are. You might know what this is, Python, right? You might just say so right there, Java. Java is the only exception that's not covered in the bootcamp, right? We're going to talk about it, but I'm not going to teach Java because I'm not expert at Java. I would say I'm very good. Expert is a strong word, but I am an expert in Python. I can do anything in Python. Then this is Linux, and AWS is the cloud. The terminal, Jenkins, GitLab, this is an IDE. Docker, Docker is so beautiful. Docker goes with everything, and Docker is sweet. I'm a big fan of Docker, and you cannot do anything without Docker, and I'm going to teach you Docker. We're going to use Docker for everything. So this is basically tools that an automation uses, right? Automation engineer uses. How to get started, focus on a programming language, right? Everything builds on a programming language, right? So Python is recommended because Python is easier to learn as a beginner, right? Python and Java are extremely popular. I would say they're both equally popular. Now JavaScript is creeping up. In testing world, I mean, Java and JavaScript are completely different, right? They're not related anyway. The only thing that makes them related is they're both programming languages. But Java and JavaScript, totally different things. So learn a programming language, pick what you want, right? My recommendation, Python. It's really easy. It's really popular. There are a lot of resources to learn Python. Learn HTML, you kind of have to. It's a very, very basic of HTML. As a QA, you're not building stuff, so really basic HTML. And w3schools.com have a great tutorial on HTML. They got a bunch of other ones, but I know the HTML one is awesome. And then everything else for Python, whatever, super SQA, come to me, learn from me, right? If you like my style, if you like my accent, right? Some people have a problem with my accent. If you like my accent, if you're good with that, just do it, right? Learn my courses, take my courses. At the end of this program, actually, this webinar, I'm going to give you free coupons to all my courses, except for the bootcamp. But the Python course, Selenium course, I'm going to give you free access. So even if you decide not to join me in the bootcamp, but you still want to learn Python and Selenium and automation, you can really take those courses for free. And the last one is very important. Find a small project, find small projects and work on projects. Programming, automation and programming, the same thing. They're literally like a sport, right? You can watch me sit here and program all day long. You're not going to know how to program. At least you're not going to be good at it, right? Just like a sport. You can watch LeBron James shoot basketball every day, all day. There's no way you're going to go shoot like him. But you go to the court and practice like him, there's a chance you could shoot like him, right? I mean, that guy is gifted, but you can get there, right? So programming is just like that. You need to practice. Just because you spend 3 months with me, that doesn't mean you're going to be like a great programmer, right? You got to practice. You got to practice. You got to practice. That's the name of the game. Like I say, this is a skills game. And in any skill, the way to get good at it is practice, right? You got to put that in your mind. You got to practice. There's no more Netflix, okay? Once you're in this, once you're committed, once you want to do this, there's no more TikTok, okay? You might do TikTok for like, I don't know, 10 minutes a day. That's my advice. There's no more Netflix. There's no more bench watching. This is going to be bench watching. You're going to practice. If you're serious about it, of course, you can do whatever you want. But if you're serious about it, and if you want to grow in this, you actually want to achieve your goals, that's going to be your life, okay? And practice automation. I have some sites I'll show you later that you can practice on. It's an e-commerce site that you can do whatever you want to do with it. And I actually have a course on how to build it. You can build your own site like that, so you can practice on it. We'll talk about it a little bit. Let's talk about salary expectations, okay? What I did is I just went and I did a little research. This was last week, actually. This data is from last week. I did a little research just so to encourage you. It's not like you don't know this already. I'm sure most of you guys know this already. So yeah, look at this, 84K, right? 84K in starting salaries. That's quite nice, depending on where you're coming from, right? If you're a doctor trying to switch to QA, that might not sound like interesting, but that is just starting salary. This one is for junior. It's not even a senior, a medium. And this is very accurate, right? I was curious, but this actually makes sense from based on my experience and people I know. This is very true. When I started, actually, I started at 82. And within a year, I was over 100 already. 1 year, okay? I went from $13 an hour internship to 82K a year full-timer. And about a year later, I would say exactly a year later, I already broke that what is it called, six-figure, barrier. So this is one example. This is another one. This is for senior, right? Senior QA, and this is also very realistic. And that's a developer salary, right? As a QA, but this is a QA. The same thing as a software engineer that actually went to school for 4 years, got a bunch of experience and all of that. Of course, they make a lot. They can make a lot more. I know a person making 250K and as just an engineer in Silicon Valley, of course. Yeah, and those are for California. So based on where your location is different, but do your own research if you want some encouragement. This is another one from Glassdoor. So these sources are, this is salary.com. This is Glassdoor.com. This is another Glassdoor.com. This one was for senior, and this one was for junior. And even junior, Glassdoor says average is 110. Wow, right? Awesome. I don't know about you. I think this is great. And this is another one from Glassdoor again, in different ranges. I just want to show you, they're all up there, right? They're all really good. This is from PayScale. And again, this is another website, but it's just really awesome. I had one from a different, so this one is not even California, right? This is North Carolina. I just randomly picked a state in the East Coast because Silicon Valley is a little kind of the exception, right? Like life is so expensive, the pay has to be higher too. But look at this, North Carolina, right? Like awesome. How nice would it be to live in the East Coast, at least in North Carolina, where things are a little bit cheaper than Silicon Valley, and get paid this kind of salary starting, right? Awesome. So that is just meant to be encouraging, and this is a week-old data, right? It's not, I didn't make this up, or it's not super old. You can do your own research, right? So far what I've been talking about is about QA, but I mentioned the bootcamp. So everything I just talked about, you are going to learn in the bootcamp. I don't need to explain the bootcamp anymore, right? Like you are going to learn how the field works, how there are tools, right? Basic Python, you can go to YouTube and learn it. Selenium, you can go to YouTube and learn it. But do you know what else to learn after that, right? You have to learn GitLab, you have to learn Docker, you have to learn Jenkins, and SSH, Vim. I mean, if you want to go into a little things we use daily, it's tons of things. But how does that come together, right? If you look at this slide, all these things work together. Maybe like sometimes Jenkins and GitLab, they do a similar things. So they're actually a competition, and GitLab is killing it, right? It's growing super fast. But I'm going to teach you Jenkins because Jenkins is still very relevant in the industry, and you need it on your resume. It's quite easy. GitLab is awesome. We're going to learn that. I mean, like I said, I'm in love with Docker, right? So all these tools, how do they work together, right? When you go get your first job and you get it on a project and they tell you test this, you test it, but then the way it gets deployed, it's going to use all the stuff you see here. For example, the application is, let's say, Python, right? Or even the test code is Python. Then it's going to run on a Linux operating system, right? And the Linux operating system in this whole package is going to learn inside of Docker. Docker is just making life easier, right? Then once it's running in Docker, and then you need to deploy it to the cloud. Where is the cloud? AWS, right? You're going to deploy it to AWS. What do you use to deploy it to AWS? Depending on the company, either you use Jenkins or you use GitLab, right? You see how all this come in the picture together? This icon is just a terminal. Everything you do here, you're going to run commands. You're going to use terminal. The terminal is like the browser, right? Everything we do for the web is on the browser, right? Look, all of us here in this room, we use browsers all the time. As an engineer, you use the terminal, right? That's like the browser. That's how we communicate with the computer. We don't use the mouse anymore, at least that much. Database, SQL, we're going to learn SQL. When we write the test, the application is going to use SQL, so our tests are also going to use SQL to talk to a MySQL database. And the course we're going to focus on MySQL. We're going to install MySQL and run on MySQL. There are other databases, but I'm going to focus on MySQL because that's the most popular one. And once you learn one, the rest is pretty much history, right? So things that are not on the slide, PyTest, it's just a framework, robot framework, BDD, which is Behave, GitHub, which is similar to GitLab, a lot older, a lot more popular, but GitLab is fancier. So GitHub is owned by Microsoft now, so they're trying to catch up to GitLab. Jira, I mentioned that that's a project management tool that you will use in real life, and we're going to manage the course using Jira. So you're going to be experienced, so you're going to look awesome on interviews. Slack is a communication tool, like I don't know a good example, but like Microsoft Teams or Skype or even Zoom itself. Zoom is trying to do something like Slack by integrating chats in it. So we're going to use Slack to communicate with each other, and so you get the realistic experience when you go to work. And people say, "Yeah, hit me up on Slack. We'll use Slack." Like, none of that is going to be new to you. You're going to be like, "Yeah, I use Slack." Git, we're going to manage all our code with Git. Vim is like, it's hard to explain, but it's a code editor. There's no UI. So when you're working on servers, you have to use Vim. And deployment, how code gets deployed. We're going to have our own pipelines and all of that. Like having a deployment process on your resume is going to look so awesome, because whoever is going to hire you is going to want you to know that stuff. So we're actually going to have deployment pipelines. You are going to have your own version of deployment pipelines that you can possibly make public, so you can put it on your portfolio, and whoever is interviewing you can go look at it, see what you did, and they're going to be impressed. Trust me with that one. That's going to be so awesome. So why the bootcamp? I think this heading should have come earlier, pretty much what we just talked about. Main reason is you get a coach, right? Like that's the difference between taking my video courses and learning, which I will help you like by answering questions, but watching YouTube, taking other courses. This one is different because you have a coach, you have me, you have access to me all the time. It's a small group, right? I'm going to take only maximum of 15 people in this group. So we're going to have that one-on-one relationship. We're going to have that. You're going to know me, I'm going to know you, I'm going to help you. And you're going to have access to an experienced person, right? That is priceless. For the price you're going to pay here, obviously you're never going to get that, right? You're not going to get a personal coach for that kind of price, at least not in the US. That's for sure. So the biggest advantage is you get a coach. The second biggest would be you get hands-on experience, which I have on the next slide. Is other than having a coach actually telling you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, having the hands-on experience. The projects that we're going to work on in the course are very much like the actual stuff you do in the real life, right? And it's just more than code, right? It's more than just learning Python or learning Selenium. You're actually learning the process of building a software, right? When you go get the job or when you go on interviews, you know exactly what that person goes through, what the life of that person looks like. And you're going to use these fancy terms in your conversation with him. So even though you don't have experience working in the software field, you're going to speak like you have experience working in the software field. There's a lot of jobs out there that say they want 1 year experience of like Selenium or Python. By the time I'm done with you, you're going to have more skills than somebody that actually did 1 year of experience. Well, depending what kind of experience, but I feel very confident your skills are going to be very competitive with somebody that actually has a 1 year of experience. Of course, not just because you come for the 3-hour session and watch me. It all depends on how much work you do outside of course, okay? And your resume is going to stand out because all the technologies I showed you right there, they're all going to be on your resume. And I've actually talked to a bunch of recruiters already, telling them this is what I'm going to teach them, what are the chances, and I've had fantastic responses from their resumes. I'm running a little bit fast because kind of running out of time, and I want to be respectful of your time, even though it's already hit the time. Just give me a few more minutes. Prerequisites, like I said, is just basic knowledge is good. Basic knowledge, the more you know, the better. But if you know your way around computers, if you can use social media, right? If you're able to go log in, create an account, publish images and blah, blah, you should be fine. If you're not sure, if your background is good enough, if you're going to have a hard time, just schedule a meeting with me one-on-one, just you and I. Let's talk. Let me understand where you're coming from. And I'll give you my opinion. Or if you're like, hey, you know what, this might be hard for you, so start here, learn this first, and come to me. Or I might be like, you'll be fine, right? So if you're not sure, book some time with me, send me an email, we can schedule it, or on my website, you can actually schedule a slot, okay? So common questions people ask is job guarantee? And my answer is like, if you were me, how would you guarantee it, right? Unless I have my own company and I'm hiring myself, I'm actually signing a check, how can I guarantee it, right? Let's say person A, person B. Person A studies hard, learns the stuff. Person B sleeps all day, doesn't do shit. They just show up for my 3 hours course and that's it. How can I give the same guarantee to those two people? I cannot. There's no way. So there's no guarantee in terms of I will offer you a job, but I can guarantee you're going to have the skill set that's required to get a job. That is a guarantee that I can provide for sure. You're going to learn all the stuff, the fancy, cool, latest technologies I just talked about. You're going to learn those, right? And so after the 3 months, if you're not done with it, I'm there with you, like helping you, even though we're not going to have a regular session twice a week, 3 hours, but I'm there helping you learn this, learn that. You're going to get stuck. I'm going to be answering. I'm there to guide you until you get the job. That's another big point I have to make is after the 3 months, that doesn't mean I'm done with you. We have a relationship. Okay. And I'm going to help you as long as it takes, literally as long as it takes. I'm going to help you achieve your goals. Assuming you have dedication, right? If somebody, like, I tell you, go study this, and next week you come and be like, yeah, you know what? I was watching football, so I didn't study it. I'm going to lose interest in helping you, right? I'm committed to the 3 months, so I'm going to help you in this 3 months. But after that, if you crap, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, I don't have no motivation to help you out. But if you're actually trying, you're studying this stuff, you're trying, and you're trying better yourself, I have to help you. Like, I'm committed to you. And my success depends on your success. My success is not how many people enroll in my bootcamp or how many people I'm teaching. That's just the beginning. My success is you achieving your goals. That's really what makes me, successful. Another common question is refund policy. Yes, there is a refund policy. You can join the course. You can attend the first class, and you can request a refund after the first class, before the second class, right? So the first class is March 4th. It's a Saturday 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 a.m. Eastern. It's 3 hours. Then the next class will be Tuesday. So you attend the Saturday course, and until Tuesday, 5 o'clock, you can send an email saying, I want a refund, and I won't even ask you. I might ask you why, like just so I can understand, but you don't have to answer that, and I will give you a full refund. So yeah, you have this. You're pretty much protected. You can join the first class. The first class we're going to talk into this is 3 hours, so we're actually going to get into real stuff. It's not just going to be introduction, but we're going to talk about how the web works and how front end, back end, what do we do, things like that. It's going to be fun, all right? And you can contact me right here if you want more information about the bootcamp. Go to the bootcamp page and just check it out. If you want to book a one-on-one consultation, you can send me an email, or you can use this calendar to book a time with me. Okay. If you want to speak to me more than 30 minutes, send me an email saying, yeah, I don't think 30 minutes is good enough. We can do better. All right. So that's really what I have for you. Yeah. So